Today we are talking about the wave function of the soul. We're going to dive into the mathematical nature of the soul, what this has to do with quantum mechanics, and a lot more. But before we dive into it, I want to give a quick little brief overview and a rundown, because some people probably are wondering, well, what is a wave function? So let me give you a little taste, okay? I'm going to try to describe a bit of quantum mechanics to you. Now, I want you to keep in mind that quantum mechanics is a very complex subject, so I'm going to try and do this in a very short amount of time here, which is not an easy thing to do. So keep in mind, I'm going to have to sacrifice some accuracy so that I can keep this short and simple. But let me give you a quick little rundown. So basically in quantum mechanics, you have something known as a quantum state. And the quantum state contains information about, let's say, a particle. Okay? So let's say you have a particle. The quantum state contains all the information that you can know about that particle. Now, what the wave function does, okay, the wave function represents a probability distribution. And so what the wave function does is it tells you the likelihood of you measuring a certain property for that particle, be it position or momentum, etc. So, as an example, let's take position. So, you have a particle and you want to know where the particle is. Well, what the wave function does is it tells you the probability of where the particle is going to be. So let's say the particle could be at position A, B, C, or D. Let's say those are the possible different positions where the particle could be. Well, where is it? Is it at A, or is it at B, or is it at C, or is it at D? Where? Where is the particle? Well, what the wave function tells you is that there is a probability associated with each one of these possible positions. So, for example, there might be a high probability that it's at A and a low probability that it's at, let's say, D, and somewhere in between for B and C. So what the wave function does is it gives you a probability for where the particle might be. And so basically, this has baffled scientific materialists and empiricists for over a century. They're trying to figure out what this means, what this says, why there is this probability in quantum mechanics. Because this doesn't happen in classical mechanics. If you throw a ball, you can know for certain where that ball is going to be. You know, you can throw it and go, oh, well, the ball's going to be at A, and you know it. However, in quantum mechanics, with the particle, the wave function represents different probabilities of where the particle may be. It may be at A, it may be at C, it may be at D, and each one of these has a different probability associated with it. So, again, scientific materialists are baffled by this. They're trying to figure this out, and then so they propose different possibilities. They think, well, maybe reality is inherently random. And this is known as the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. So they think that, well, maybe reality is inherently random, and that's why there's a probability associated with the position of the particle, because reality is just random. Then you have the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, and they basically say that, well, there's a different universe for each position that the particle could be at. For example, if we find the particle to be at position A, well, then it's at position A in our universe. But there's also another universe where it's at position B, and another universe where it's at position C, and another universe where it's at position D, etc. So you have all these different interpretations of quantum mechanics. Some say reality is random. Some say there are many, many universes to take account for all the different possibilities. And honestly, each one of these interpretations are absolutely crazy. And Hyperianism has a very elegant solution for this. So what is the solution? Well, let me give you an example. The solution to this is that everything inherently has an inner aspect, has mind. And so let me give you an example. Right now, let's use me, like let's pretend that I am a particle. I right now exist in a superposition of possible states. I could continue here and talk to you and be talking to you right now. Or I could go up and go to my kitchen and get something to eat. Or I could pick up my coffee cup and take a sip of coffee. all of these different states are available to me, and I am in a superposition of them, but I choose to do only one of them. And that is me continuing to talk to you right now. Now, if there were a scientist outside observing me, he might think, well, there's a certain probability, right? Oh, there's a probability that he'll keep talking, but there's some other probability that he'll go to the fridge, and there's some other probability that he'll pick up the coffee cup right now. But what's really going on is that it's not that there's some randomness or probability, it's that I am minded. I have an inner aspect, and I choose to continue talking rather than going and actualizing some other state. So in quantum mechanics, the particle isn't material. The particle has an inner aspect because the particle is a thought structure. It's a structure of thought. Okay? So anyway, what this means, the reason why scientific materialists have all these crazy interpretations is because they deny the inner aspect. Imagine a scientist trying to explain my behavior but denying that I have a mind, right? Like, oh, why is he doing this rather than that? Why is he continuing to talk rather than going to the fridge? Why is he doing this rather than that and this rather? But they denied that I have a mind. Of course, they're going to come up with all the, oh, well, maybe it's just random. Maybe there are many universes. Maybe it's et cetera, you see? And this is why they've been baffled by a century by quantum mechanics, because they deny the inner aspect of existence, when it's actually quite elegant and quite simple, in that the particle has an inner aspect. That's why reality is not inherently random and it's not inherently probabilistic. That's just what happens when you try to fit a materialist and empirical interpretation over something that has mind. Now, I also want to make it very, very clear that the particle, it doesn't have a monad linked to it. I am a monad linked to a body. There is no monad linked to a particle, like an electron. However, the particle is a thought complex. It's a structure of thoughts. So, even though it doesn't have a mind linked to it, it is a thought structure, meaning it still has an inner aspect. So, that was a real quick crash course in quantum mechanics and the Hyperion interpretation of quantum mechanics. Now, keep in mind, that was very quick. I could do probably a 15-hour course on this sort of thing. So I had to sacrifice some accuracy and metaphor to get the point across in a very short amount of time. But essentially what we're talking about today is the soul, as we continue reading Soul Science by Steve Madison, which is a great book, by the way. And this is going to be our final reading on it tonight. If you want to support the author and read this book for yourself, I highly recommend you do so. And the link to read the book for yourself and support the author will be pinned in the comments of this video. But we're going to continue to explore soul science and expand upon, this little intro I gave and talk about this a lot more. Syntax, semantics, causation. And remember, I know it took a while. Remember, we're talking about the wave function of the soul, understanding the mathematical nature of the soul. So syntax, semantics, causation. Ontological mathematics is a dual aspect monism of syntax and semantics, information carrier and information carried. So, ontological mathematics, Hyperionism, is a dual aspect monism of syntax and semantics. Dual aspect monism, as a reminder, means that there is only one thing, but it has two sides to it, two aspects to it. And what is the one thing? It's mind, thought. Mathematically, what is mind and thought? It's a sinusoidal wave. So, there is only one thing, sinusoidal waves, and sinusoidal waves have two aspects to them, the information carrier and the information carried. So the two aspects of the sinusoidal wave, one aspect, the formal aspect, is the mathematical structure. Right? That wave has a mathematical structure, a mathematical form. The other side to it is the content. And the content is how you experience that mathematical form. Let's say, for example, it's the color red. So there's only one thing. It's a monism. And that one thing is sinusoidal waves. Sinusoidal waves have the structure side, the formal side, which is the mathematical structure, and then the content side, which is how you experience, which is the experience of that wave, which would be, let's say, the color red. So this is a critical consideration when it comes to causation and makes ontological mathematics entirely different from scientific materialism. Move over here. The dual aspect causation provided by ontological mathematics is exactly what explains the character of free will, something wholly inexplicable in scientific terms. To understand how ontological mathematical causation works and the incredible difference it makes, consider the following example. So, let's say that a man is walking along the sidewalk and a gust of wind catches him and causes his arm to involuntarily shoot up in the air. So we got a guy walking down the street and a gust of wind hits him, and that gust of wind involuntarily causes his arm to shoot up in the air. Now this would be syntactic causation. So the wind has no intentions when it forces the man's arm into the air, and the man has no intention of raising his arm. His arm is raised as a matter of course by the operations of purely external syntactic causation. It's default causation. No agent, no man is free when it comes to this type of causation. No will is in operation. Now consider the situation where a man simply chooses to raise his arm. There is something totally different about this kind of causation. There's no external agent that's forcing something to happen. The man's arm is raised because of internal causation, because he freely wills it to rise. Consider what is involved in this simple action. Let's go through it step by step. First, imagine a man thinking of raising his arm. Does it rise? No, it doesn't. Why not? Because thinking of raising your arm isn't the same as raising your arm. To actually raise your arm, you must do two things: think and will it. Willing an action is that vital step when you convert a possible action into an actual action, when you collapse the wave function, to use the jargon of quantum mechanics. So you see how I will choose an action based on my thought and will, which is all this internal causation. Now again, imagine a scientific materialist trying to explain my movements if they do away with my mind. Well, it would all seem very random and probabilistic in an analogous way. In the level of quantum mechanics, when they look at a particle, this is why it seems to them that the particle is random or probabilistic. That's because they deny that the particle has an internal aspect. Now, it's not that the particle has a mind attached to it. There's no monad that has incarnated as an electron. No. But the electron is a complex of thought. It's a thought complex. And so that thought complex still has an inner aspect. When you go to sleep and dream at night, there are dream characters in your dream world. Now, there are no monads attached to those dream characters, but they are still thought complexes. Those dream characters are thought complexes. They don't have a monad attached to them, but they're still an aggregate of thought forms. So what does willing an action actually entail? And one other thing that I want to emphasize here about quantum mechanics, we use the video game analogy a lot. So imagine that in a video game, let's say there's video game scientists who deny that the code exists, and they're trying to figure out why a certain in-game object moves in a certain way. Right? Let's say there's an in-game object moving around. And it's like, oh wow, this is really weird. It moves so randomly and probabilistically. When in reality, it's the code that dictates how it moves. But since the in-game scientists would deny that the code exists, it's going to seem crazy. And they might think, oh wow, maybe the game is inherently random. Or maybe there are many different games that are generated for each action that that object could possibly take. And we have a multiverse of games. You see the absurd reality, the absurd results you get when you deny that the game is based on a code. Same thing in quantum mechanics when you deny that there is an inner aspect, a mental aspect, a mind aspect to existence. It seems like it's random or probabilistic or whatnot. And so you might even be thinking, well, if this solution is so elegant, which it is, that reality is minded, why don't scientists accept this idea? Because it is 100% contrary to their empirical ideology. So empiricism and scientific empiricism, science is an empirical philosophy. Scientific empiricism is based on only things that can be observed. The mind can't be observed, so they say it does not exist. I can't observe your mind, can I? No, I can't. I can't literally see your mind floating around. That's not how it works. The mind is unobservable. It doesn't exist in space and time. It exists outside space and time. So mind falls outside of the empirical paradigm. So if you're asking, why doesn't science just accept this idea if it's so elegant? It's because it literally falls outside their paradigm. And it would be like for a scientist to say, oh yes, everything is based on mind. For an empirical scientist to say this would be like a religious believer saying that God doesn't exist. Saying, why doesn't science accept that if it's such an elegant solution, why doesn't science say, that reality is minded? That's like saying, well, why doesn't a religious believer say that God doesn't exist? Because it is so ingrained in their mind. It is their ideology that they have subscribed to, that they have attached everything to it, that they're not just going to give it up. So asking a scientist to realize that reality is mathematical mind is like trying to get a religious believer to believe or to acknowledge that there is no external God. It's just not going to happen unless in a very, very, very rare case where you have an extremely rational person who is able to break out of that conditioning. And that's very rare. So props to you guys, by the way, because I see so many of you guys who have broken out of so many different conditioning systems. I see so many of you guys who tell me that you've had religious trauma syndrome, you broke out of religious thinking. I've seen so many of you tell me that you've broken out of materialist thinking. So many say that you've broken out of New Age and mystical thinking or occult thinking and all that, and realized the truth of logic and reason. And so big props to you guys. I always say this because I know this information can seem daunting, it can seem complex, but give yourself credit, because you have done taken a huge step and a huge leap that is beyond the capacity of most people, because most people can't break out of the conditioning that religion or empiricism or New Ageism or mysticism has instilled. So, yeah. Anyway, let's continue. We're talking about this example of raising your arm by thinking and willing. But what does willing in action actually entail? What it means is that you not only contemplate the action as a hypothetical action, but you issue the syntactic commands to execute it. See, right now I can think, I'm going to go into the kitchen and get a snack. But that's not going to happen unless I will it. It is now in my mind as a potentiality, but it's not actual unless I will it and send syntactic commands to actually go and manifest that, make it happen, collapse into that state. So what it means is that you not only contemplate the action as a hypothetical, as a possibility, but you issue the syntactic command to execute it. The genius of this system is that you don't have to calculate how each muscle must move in order for your arm to do what you want. all of the complex syntactic mathematical calculations are internalized. They are conducted unconsciously, automatically, like the beating of your heart. Right? You don't have to constantly, will your heart to beat. It's conducted unconsciously, automatically. It's like a program that's running in the background. And one thing that I want to say about this too, right? It's very, very interesting that you don't have to will, your heart to beat. It's sort of just running in the background as this program. You don't have to consciously will it. It's unconsciously willed. But what's really interesting, and what I want you guys to realize, this as above, so below mentality, where not only is this happening on you, the individual scale, right? We're having the monadic and avatar perspective. Now let's go to the absolute perspective, the Abraxian perspective. Think about the absolute perspective. The absolute perspective is when you take all of us together as one, and in that case, the universe is our body. And what's really interesting to think about this is things like, the movements of the planets. That is something that we are causing, but we're causing it unconsciously. Just like we don't have to consciously cause our heart to beat. So on the individual avatar monadic level, we are causing our heart to beat, but we're doing it on an unconscious level, right? Likewise, in the absolute perspective, the universe is our body, and we are causing planets to rotate, the movements of the heavens, all these sort of things, is like the beating of our heart, is the unconscious process of us as the absolute. So just really reflect on that, and how these sorts of perspectives are really what start to get you in the proper way of viewing and understanding reality. So all of these complex syntactic mathematical calculations are internalized. They are conducted unconsciously, automatically, like the beating of your heart. And this is possible exactly because of the dual aspect system of syntax and semantics. What this means is that there is a one-to-one mapping between the semantic description of reality and the syntactic structure of reality. To consciously think of an action in man-made language, like if you think, I would like to go to the fridge right now. To consciously think of an action in man-made language, a semantic procedure instantly readies the unconscious syntax required to action it. Rising from my chair, causing my muscles to contract and walk over to the other room. Willing is the decision to execute the semantic thought and its associated syntax. All of these essential considerations are absent from scientific materialism. There is no dual aspect system in science. There is no internal agency. There is no free will. Right? No wonder you get crazy results in scientific materialism, like the Copenhagen random interpretation of quantum mechanics, or the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, because you're trying to remove what is necessary for reality to operate. They're essential. All of these essential considerations are absent from scientific materialism. There is no internal agency. There's no free will. For science, a man's decision to lift his arm is no different in kind from a man's arm being raised by a gust of wind. So that's how scientific materialism operates. It operates in this very physical, deterministic way. Whereas in Hyperianism, we have physical determination, determinism, and mental determinism as well. So what is physical determination? Physical determination, imagine a row of dominoes, not one domino knocking one over the other. That's physical determination. The dominoes, one knocking, the chain reaction of them knocking each other over. What's mental determination? Me thinking and then willing eternally, hey, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to push over the first domino, and I will it, walk over there, and push it. We have in Hyperianism internal mental determinism. Scientific materialism, not the case. They view all of existence and all of reality operating at the level of dominoes knocking each other over. That's how everything operates in a simplistic way. Of course, quantum mechanics, is I'm not going to get into those details. But physical, in essence, physical determinism is what is the classical way of understanding in terms of scientific materialism. Now, as I said, of course, it's a little different in quantum mechanics because they start inserting indeterminism in the form of randomness or determinism in the form of many worlds, things like this. But the main point to realize is that they get all of these absurd results by removing the internal aspect, by denying mental causation. For science, a man's decision to lift his arm is no different in kind from a man's arm being raised by a gust of wind. Both actions are caused by default, syntactic actions, automatic, devoid of will, devoid of free will, with absolutely no purpose, meaning, or point. It's insane. According to science, you do not freely choose to raise your arm. Rather, the lifeless, mindless, unfree atoms of which you are made, subject to the unfree laws of physics, cause in some obscure way that's never explained by science, causes your arm to raise itself at a particular point in time. You epiphenomenally experience this action over which you had no say at all. It was all handled by external physics. As a conscious choice on your point, that is, you experience the phenomena or illusion that you have exercised your free will, when in fact all that happened without any conscious decisions on your part. You, according to science, are incapable of freely choosing what to do. You are part of an inescapable nexus of immanent causation which has no scope whatsoever for free action. So in other words, everything is determined and you are just part of a deterministic chain of events. Again, quantum mechanics makes this a little more obscure depending on which interpretation you choose, but in essence, being simplistic about it, your decision to go over and go to the fridge, according to scientific materialism, is not actually your decision. You're going to do it. You're forced to do it. You will do it, and this is caused by these syntactic events, and you just experience the illusion that it's your choice. And that's absolutely false. It actually is your choice. You are the internal agent that causes it to happen. It's not done to you. You make it happen. According to science, it's done to you, and it's just an illusion that you made it happen. No, the reverse is true. Scientific materialism and empiricism gets everything on its head. The reverse is true. You do an action because it was willed by you to actualize that choice which existed as a potentiality due to your thought. Thinking will generate these potentialities, and then will transform these potentialities into actualities. Only transcendent entities outside the immanent world can reject their own free actions. Can inject their own free actions into the immanent world. That's us as souls, minds, monads, transcendent entities outside the immanent world, the holos, which we inject our free actions into. Only those such entities are not bound by immanent causation, hence are free to do their own thing, by their own direction, independent of the immanent laws of physics. Freedom is possible only in a system of transcendent monads, each with its own independent agency. In science, there are no transcendent elements. There is nothing outside space and time. There is only one immanent system in which everything is bound together. Hence, everything is compelled to obey the common laws of physics, and there are no agents that can insert their own independent execution of the laws of physics into the mix. So, according to science, it's all just based on the laws of the physical world, and there's no such thing as independent agency. But free will is exactly that, the capacity of entities to execute actions on their own account, insulated from any slavish dependence on the external environment. In science, there is nothing but the external environment. And your mind, your free will, your subjectivity, your experience of having free will, that's just an illusion according to science. Your experience of free will is an illusion according to science. In science, there are no subjects, no entities with independent agency, no entities with interiority. The atoms of which you are composed belong to the immanent world, the physical world. They don't belong to you. These atoms obey the laws of the immanent universe. They don't obey your laws. There is no you. You are simply an epiphenomenon, an unreal, illusory entity subject to a bizarre delusion that you can exercise freedom. And in Hyperianism, we know that's the opposite, right? What we are truly are mathematical minds, eternal. And the physical world, as existing independently from us, is what is the illusion. Because there is no external world that exists independently from us. All of the external world is dependent on us, is dependent on mind, just like a dream is dependent on mind. This physical world is dependent on mind. There is no such thing as matter outside of the mind. Matter depends on mind. Matter has never been observed to exist independently from mind because it's an impossibility. It is an impossibility. All matter is mediated through mind. Any matter that anyone has ever encountered anywhere at any time has always been mediated through mind. That's because matter depends on mind for its existence. It's mind externalized. It's mind extended. Just like no dream world has ever been observed without the dreamer. Because remove the dreamer, you remove the dream world. That's why matter can't be accessed apart from the mind. Because matter depends on mind, just like a dream world depends on the dreamer. In ontological mathematics, by contrast, you are genuinely a real being, capable of directing your own actions. That's because you are a transcendent monad, not an immanent collection of atoms. The sinusoids of which your monadic mind is made are uniquely yours. Unlike the case in science, where the atoms of which you are made are definitely not yours, but they're just lifeless, mindless objects in the world. Science can never explain free will precisely because science is about immanence and has no transcendent elements, the latter being essential to freedom. You cannot exercise freedom if no part of you is you. If every part of you belongs to the immanent physical world under the control of the immanent world. Ontological mathematics provides the complete explanation of causation. Science is tragically incomplete in relation to its account of causation. In fact, science increasingly rejects causation and bases everything on randomness and probabilities. Classically, physics was deterministic. Now, with quantum mechanics, for example, the Copenhagen interpretation is random. There are other interpretations that are deterministic, but the most popular and accepted version of quantum mechanics, the Copenhagen interpretation, is inherently probabilistic and random. Science is tragically incomplete in relation to its account of causation. In fact, science increasingly rejects causation and bases everything on randomness and probabilities. Things don't happen in science for any reason or cause. Rather, so science claims, things happen randomly. But each random event has a certain probability associated with it. So, although absolutely anything can happen at any moment, it's more likely that more probable events will occur, although there's zero guarantee that these more probable outcomes will be realized. The soul god. There are two entities that have dominated human thinking and faith from the dawn of civilization: God and the soul. Even though they have been obsessively discussed for thousands of years by countless people, including many of humanity's greatest geniuses, the number of people today who can actually answer the question, what is God made of, and what is the soul made of is vanishingly small. Well, can you give the answer? If you can't, isn't it time you started studying soul science? Soul science, as it turns out, is also God science, because God is a hive mind made of souls. Souls turn out to be the foundational energy units of reality, the basic building blocks of existence. Scientific materialism, which scoffs at the very notion of souls and God, doesn't scoff at infinite universes, at existence jumping into existence out of non-existence, of free will being an illusion, of cats in special boxes being alive dead and alive dead all at once, of human beings being talking food, of consciousness being a meaningless epiphenomenon, or miraculous emergent property, which can in no way override materialism and its laws, hence is absolutely pointless and wholly contrary to Occam's razor and the principle of sufficient reason. So science is very selective about what it regards as being absurd, because look at all these crazy things that it believes. Religious absurdity is always condemned and mocked, but scientific absurdity is never regarded as absurd and never mocked. Because really, scientific materialism is just another form of religion. It's a religion of the senses. It's a faith in the senses. So science is a subject that concerns space-time, material immanence, the physical world. Souls, by contrast, belong to the transcendent, immaterial domain of frequency, hence are literally outside science's paradigm, which breaks down at singularities, exactly where God and souls are found. Where science fails is an ultra-precise point, the source of existence. So it fails at the source of existence, which is none other than a mathematical energy point, a singularity of eternal and necessary monadic mathematical minds. And just as a reminder to anyone who is new, because I see there's a lot of new people here today, when we talk about God, we are not talking about God in the traditional Abrahamic sense as an external creator deity. We are talking about God as us. We are each individual souls, meaning we are each individual monadic minds, mathematical entities, and taken together as a collective, we are God. So we are God. There's no external God. And you see all the absurdities that science would rather believe in, such as many worlds, multiverse, randomness, things happening for no reason at all. All these crazy, absurd ideas result from their denial of reality being inherently mind. They would rather introduce randomness and all these absurdities that are just as insane as miracles because they don't want to admit that we live in a mathematical mental reality because it lies outside of their paradigm. It's just as difficult for them to admit that reality is mental as it is for a religious believer to admit that God doesn't exist. This is why science is in such an absurd, backwards, and poor state with regard to knowing the fundamental nature of reality. It can never know the fundamental nature of reality because it's outside of its paradigm. It can't know it until a paradigm shift occurs, and it must shift into the new paradigm of ontological mathematics. It must embrace Hyperianism. Science collapses at the most basic question: what caused the Big Bang? Terence McKenna observed, modern science is based on the principle, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. Well, the one free miracle is the appearance of all the mass and energy in the universe and all the laws that govern it in a single instance from nothing. Well, guess what? There are no miracles. The true science of existence replaces science's free miracle with an exact solution, a mathematical mind, which exists as a transcendent, immaterial singularity made of pure sinusoidal energy. Energy in itself is not material, it's mental. It does not have dimensions. It is zero dimensional, exactly as required by Occam's razor and the principle of sufficient reason. Some scientists will tell you that reality comprises one-dimensional energy strings vibrating in an 11-dimensional space-time. They claim that this is the answer to existence. In fact, it's not one-dimensional energy strings that comprise existence. In fact, reality comprises zero-dimensional energy sinusoids in zero-dimensional souls in a zero-dimensional singularity, creating an all-powerful hive mind, aka God. This transcendent hive mind, a mental singularity, is responsible for everything. So I want you to see how absurd it is that scientific materialists cling to this idea that they even reduce reality down to one-dimensional vibrating strings, when reality is zero-dimensional sinusoids. They're almost there. They're so close, but they can't give up the idea of matter, such that they've reduced reality down to one-dimensional strings, but they can't go from 1 to 0. Why? Because 0 is mind. This is why science breaks down at 0. It breaks down at black hole singularities. It breaks down at the Big Bang singularities because it's defined by 0. 0 is mind, and they can't abide by 0 because 0 breaks their materialist system. Reality comprises zero-dimensional energy sinusoids in zero-dimensional souls in a zero-dimensional singularity, creating an all-powerful hive mind, aka God, which is also zero-dimensional. This transcendent hive mind, a mental singularity, is responsible for everything. This is the absolute. This is what we are. The Big Bang was the creation of the immanent universe of, in Hyperionism, what we call the holos, the universe of matter, from the transcendent domain of mind. Now, God, the absolute, or what you might call the hive mind, has nothing to do with any kind of woo-woo thinking. It's a system of ontological Fourier mathematics, linking individual frequency domains, mind singularities, to a collective space-time universe. All the mysteries of mind, life, qualia, subjectivity, free will, the unconscious and consciousness reside in frequency singularities and have nothing at all to do with space-time matter, as scientific materialism would have you believe, given its absolute faith in mindless, lifeless, meaningless, purposeless, pointless matter, which randomly jumps into existence from nowhere for no reason. This is not a mystical universe, or a material universe, or a universe of faith, nor is it a scientific universe. It is, in fact, a mathematical universe and has a precise formula which shows exactly what souls, God, matter, and the space-time universe are all made of. They are all made of the same thing. Why wouldn't they be? Occam's razor and the principle of sufficient reason demand it. Isn't it time you actually started trying to know what the soul is, rather than having a simple faith in it, or believing you can mystically connect to it somehow? Isn't it time you became an expert in soul science, given that your whole life and existence itself depends on it? And here's the great news. It's all in the math. All you have to do is the math, and you will know everything. The mathematical soul. As soon as you introduce mathematics into religion, spirituality, and metaphysics, you get rid of the bullshit. There's a lot of bullshit in religion, spirituality, and metaphysics. It's filled with bullshit. But when you introduce mathematics, it cuts all the bullshit away, just as mathematics cured physics of a lot of its bullshit as well. Ontological mathematics cures physics of all of its surviving bullshit, especially as regards quantum mechanics. So why can't physicists understand quantum mechanics? It's because they think of it in a local, space-time, material, immanent, physical terms when in fact it's defined by the non-local frequency, the immanent and the transcendent. Quantum physics is foundationally about singularities, but physics is about space-time. You cannot understand transcendence via immanence. Reality comprises transcendent entities, which are monadic minds, projecting between them an immanent world of space-time and matter. Unless you understand this ontology of quantum physics, how the transcendent domain constructs and everywhere penetrates the immanent domain, you have no chance of understanding quantum reality and have to start invoking randomness, probabilism, statistics, uncertainty, indeterminism, indeterminacy, wave function collapse, cats that are simultaneously alive and dead, and alive dead, and so on. When you have the wrong paradigm for understanding something, you obviously have to add bizarre interpretations, misinterpretations, to try to explain something. Quantum physics needs a paradigm that generates the immanent space-time from the transcendent, which are frequency singularities. But science rejects the transcendent. It has to replace it with something, and what it replaces it with is all the nonsense about randomness, probabilism, and uncertainty. So, why does quantum mechanics, why do scientists insert all the absurdities? Because they deny mind. As soon as you accept the existence of mind, you don't need randomness, probabilism, and uncertainty. You only have randomness, probabilism, and uncertainty when you try and deny mind. And of course, you're going to run into absurdities if you try to deny what existence is made of. Just like if you were in a video game and denied the code, you're going to run into absurdities. If you're in a dream world and deny the dreamer, you're going to run into absurdities. And if you exist in the holos and deny the source, you're going to run into absurdities. So quantum mechanics can be explained via mind, not by randomness, not by probabilism, and not by uncertainty. But for scientists to realize this, they have to accept mind and reject empiricism and materialism, but that's just as likely as a religious believer rejecting God. It falls outside the paradigm. Monadic frequency singularities performing ontological Fourier mathematics get rid of all the weirdness and idiocy spouted by quantum physicists and turns quantum physics into a system of strict certainty and mathematical determinism. But this determinism that involves self-determinism, hence freedom of action with regard to the rest of the universe on behalf of autonomous monadic minds. In science, there is no self-determinism, only other determinism and indeterminism, and therefore free will is impossible since there is no agent in science that can determine its own considered actions using only its own resources. For some bizarre reason, people look to indeterminism rather than self-determinism as the basis of free will. Indeterminism is in fact as hostile to free will as immanent determinism, that is, other determinism. Imagine that you were walking along the road and your arm suddenly shot up in the air thanks to indeterminism. Now, you couldn't possibly argue that this was a free action on your part. You didn't know anything about it and had no control over it. And that's something I really want to emphasize here. So many people think that randomness is free will, but that's so stupid. Randomness is the opposite of free will. So I really want people to realize this and get that out of your head. Get it out of your head that randomness is free will, because it's not. Like this example says, if you were walking along and suddenly your arm randomly shot up, that's not free will. That's the opposite of free will. Randomness is not free will. Indeterminism goes hand in hand with randomness. Indeterminism, randomness, is in fact as hostile to free will as immanent determinism, other determinism, or even physical determinism. So your hand shooting up in the air randomly, you couldn't possibly argue that this was a free action on your part. You didn't know anything about it and had no control over it. Indeterminism cannot explain free will in any way. Only self-determinism can. And self-determinism relies strictly on transcendence, that is, an order of existence of singularity minds outside immanence, space-time. The soul, the eternal monadic mind, is not some freaky nonsense on par with the nonsense science spouts about alive dead cats and talking food, but pure analytic math. The soul is simply a transcendent quantum wave function of the mind that docks with the immanent quantum wave function of a space-time body. Why would anyone find that baffling? One day it will be regarded along the lines of 1 + 1 = 2. There will be children in the future who are taught this in primary school and who will never once doubt the existence of the eternal monadic soul. It will be the most certain fact in their lives with all the math to prove it. You know it. That day is coming. Something and nothing. Now, people get really confused when it comes to something, nothing, and net nothing. Okay, so let's remember these three different things. We have something, nothing, and net nothing. If you can't grasp the difference, you are lost. Now, two simple equations clarify everything. 0 = 0 means nothing equals nothing. And this is the equation of non-existence. 0 = 0, that's non-existence. We start with nothing, and of course we end with nothing. We have nothing except nothing in the system. This system, it can't do anything. It just doesn't exist. Okay? 0 = 0 is nothingness. Now look at this other equation. 1 - 1 = 0. Now on the left side of the equation, you have something. You have a 1 and you have a -1. And their joined result, if you think of 1 and -1, imagine them as two entities. You have a 1 and a -1 that exist, but their total result is 0. And that is net nothing. You see, net nothing is a result. It's not non-existence. Net nothing is the result of many balanced positive and negative values. So 1 - 1 = 0. Two opposites related and combined to equal 0 is something that equals nothing. You see the difference between nothing equals nothing? This is something that equals nothing. I'm going to say that again. The first equation has nothing that equals nothing. The second equation has something that equals nothing. You have two somethings combined that result in nothing. To arrive at nothing in this equation, we first of all need something, the number 1. Then we need the operation of subtraction. However, we could also write this equation as 1 plus -1 = 0. Now we have the number 1 again and the operation of addition, but we also have a new number, -1. Now, do you see how we're starting to build up a very complex system here, all of which has a net result of nothing? So this is a very simplistic example of 1 - 1 that equals 0. But imagine that you add all the complexity of mathematics, all the various numbers, but taken together, whose result equals 0. That's a simplistic way of understanding ontological mathematics. Now, of course, we know that these numbers are actually sinusoidal waves, but these sinusoidal waves are mathematical entities that contain values within themselves, and they balance to 0. So, ontologically, mathematics are waveforms, sinusoids. But in a simplistic way, do you see how something can equal nothing? And it can be a vast, it literally is as complex as the universe itself. But altogether, it balances to 0. And 0 is the number of mind. That's why we exist within mind. We exist within 0. Because 0 is what exists. And something is just the other side of 0. The universe is the other side of the frequency singularity. The universe, the physical universe, is the other side of zero. Just like the video game is the other side of the code. So, when we say that everything comes from nothing, we're not referring to the first equation. We're not referring to 0 equals 0. That would be crazy. Science, in effect, says that the universe randomly jumps into existence out of non-existence. It claims, in effect, that 0 equals 0 morphs into 0 equals 1 minus 1. So, basically, science tries to say that from 0 equals 0, suddenly everything just appears. So, but when we are saying, and then randomly, right, for no reason, but when we say that everything comes from nothing, whoa, sorry about that. Okay, when we say that everything comes from nothing, we are referring to equation 2. We are saying that 0 equals 0 can be completely discounted because it concerns non-existence, but that something equals nothing is the basis of all existence and the foundational truth of existence. It is impossible for something equals something to be true because reality would not be in its compulsory Occam's razor ground state of nothing, and a sufficient reason would be needed to be supplied for the violation of Occam's razor and the principle of sufficient reason. If existence can be explained entirely via something equals nothing, which it can be and must be, then something equals something, even if it were possible, which it isn't, could never be reached in the first place since reality would stop at its simplest existential solution, something equals nothing. So, nothing equals nothing is non-existence, and that tells us nothing about existence, so it can be completely disregarded. Something equals nothing is what existence is. This explains existence. Nothing can prevent the existence of nothing, and nothing requires nothing. Something equals nothing equates to eternal and necessary existence. And each one of us as minds are something equals nothings, because each one of us are zeros, but our sinusoidal contents are all, our mathematical contents are all somethings. We all have mathematical contents arranged in very intricate patterns, but overall that pattern results in 0. Okay, and then third, something equals something. This requires the explanation of why there is something rather than nothing, and no one has ever answered this question, or ever could. It violates Occam's razor and the principle of sufficient reason, hence it's impossible. Something requires something, hence is dependent, not independent, not a self-standing substance. Something can be prevented from existing by nothing, a more stable and simple ground state. If something equals nothing can exist, which it can because nothing can prevent it, then this ipso facto excludes that something equals something, which would have to be built on top of something equals nothing, thus creating an untenable substance dualism of something equals nothing coexisting and interacting with something equals something, and this is a totally different system obeying totally different rules. In other words, something equals something is extraneous, superfluous, redundant, and any detailed analysis of it demonstrates that it's infinitely unstable. Only nothing equals nothing and something equals nothing are stable. But nothing equals nothing is non-existence, and thus we can ignore it because it's non-existence and has nothing to do with existence, leaving only something equals nothing as the answer to existence. Nothing in this case is, of course, net nothing, because it's the net result of somethings rather than being simple nothing. Now, do you see how straightforward it is to analyze existence without doing any observations, any experiments, any science, without having faith or engaging in mysticism? No one needs to pray, believe, meditate, or try mindfulness. All you need to do is conduct rational and logical a priori deduction, such as to satisfy the fundamental principle of existence. The principle of sufficient reason, and its corollary, Occam's razor, the principle of maximum simplicity. The answer to existence is the simplest and most rational, not the most complex and least rational. It's exactly because we know that existence must be maximally simple, rational, logical, and stable that we know exactly what the answer is, and that is pure mathematics. Reason and logic alone explain existence. Everything else is totally man-made, human nonsense driven by emotional hysteria, demented mystical intuition, or sensory mania. Everything except mathematics can be dismissed as irrational and illogical gibberish. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 1 plus 1 minus 2 equals 0. Get it? By the way, nothing at all, which is non-existence, leading to everything, all existence, where the arrow symbol denotes a random operation, devoid of sufficient reason, is logically and mathematically impossible. This impossible equation is, of course, none other than science's demented account of the Big Bang. In other words, the account that science gives of the Big Bang is mathematically incoherent, ontologically speaking. If it were true, which it isn't, then everything becoming nothing at all would also be true, and all of existence could vanish at any instant, back to non-existence. But don't worry, it can't. So by a simple analysis of the concepts of something, nothing, and not nothing, nothing at all, everything, existence, non-existence, all existence, randomness, and so on, we can arrive at a definitive explanation of existence. Everything is handled conceptually, deductively, rationally, and logically. All other considerations are man-made impositions and fallacies based on the feelings, senses, and mystical intuitions, and lead to the radical falsification of reality. Food and humans. A quote by Thomas Aquinas: "For food is changed into the truth of human nature." So, according to scientific materialism, this objector to the Christian truth is correct. A human being, from a scientific point of view, is just reconstituted food, drink, and air, right? Because according to scientific materialism, you're just a collection of dead matter, dead atoms, and you are what you consume. The food you consume, the drink that you drink, the air that you breathe. So according to scientific materialism, you're just a walking collection of food, drink, and air. You're reconstituted food, drink, air. And according to science, humans are talking food, because they don't give humans that inner mental aspect that has mental inner causation. Who knew? They don't teach you that in science class. Forget the Bible's talking snakes. Science's talking food is where the action is. Aquinas wrote, Objection number 2. Further, Adam's rib belonged to the truth of human nature in him, as ours does in us, but Adam's rib will rise again not in Adam, but in Eve. Else Eve would not rise again at all, since she was made from that rib. Therefore, whatever belonged in man to the truth of human nature will not at all rise again in him. And now, does this count at all as philosophy, or is it story commentary? Clearly, it's story commentary. Okay, let's move on now to soul wave functions, the title of this video. So soul wave functions, let's go. Reality comprises sinusoidal monadic minds. That's it. There's nothing else. This is the definitive answer to existence arrived at by the application of the PSR and its corollary, Occam's razor. Imagine that reality was made of just one monad. Now it's not. Reality is made up of myriad monads, but let's imagine for a moment that reality was just one monad. What would reality be like? The monadic mind, which is what you are, would do just one thing. From its constituent sinusoids, it would spontaneously generate space-time data. This basic process is what is called dreaming. So if there was just one monad, one monadic mind, it would just continuously generate a dream world for itself. The mind generates its own content, which seems alien to it. It is not aware that it is actually the author of this material, that the content is its own construct. When you're in a dream, you think that the dream world is real. You aren't aware that you made the dream world. Just like right now, in this collective dream world, people aren't aware that they made this dream world. They're like dreamers. When you're asleep and you dream at night, you don't know that you made the dream world, even though you did. You take it to be 100% real. You get invested in the dream narrative. Same with this world. People don't know that they are the collective dreamer, that we dreamt this world up, and we get invested in the dream narrative. So the mind generates its own content, and this content, the dream world, seems alien to it. It's not aware that it's actually the author of this material, that the content is its own construct. Its own mental productions seem strange and baffling, a great mystery to be solved. But another mode of mind is possible in dreaming, which is lucid dreaming. Now, the lucid dreamer knows that he is dreaming. While he is not in complete charge of the dream and cannot control it absolutely, he can certainly direct it to his considerable satisfaction. But what does this imply? It tells us that the dreamer experiencing the dream is different from the dreamer making the dream. In this distinction, we can see the seed of the distinction between the unconscious mind and the conscious mind. Okay? So the dream and the dreamer aren't truly separate. It's all mind. It's all you. But there's the unconscious and the conscious aspect. The mind isn't just some simplistic, monolithic entity. It has many different modes, many different potentialities. It is based on simple principles, but the underlying simplicity produces enormous complexity. For example, just as the 26 simple letters of the alphabet lead to countless complex books based on them, it's crucial to understand that the monadic mind is immaterial, and that the space-time world that it creates in its dream is also, at root, immaterial. Although the mind experiences a dream world as real, solid, extended world located outside the mind, it's all just a mathematical illusion. A dream world is a dimensional projection within a mind. It does not extend outside of the mind. It's not an independent external reality. It's all happening within the sphere of mind. The number one fallacy of materialism, and thus of science, is that the material world has nothing to do with mind and exists prior to and outside mind. In fact, materialism asserts that mind is constructed from matter in some unexplained way. All of these considerations are false. A dream world, apparently solid and real, is a mental construct, a mental projection wholly bound by mind. When you look at a sleeping person who is unknown to you in the midst of the most enchanting dream, you of course see nothing but the sleeping person. You don't see the dream at all. You have no idea that it's happening. The dream doesn't erupt out of the dreamer's head. There's no sign at all that the dreamer is experiencing a vast and vivid dream world that seems entirely real to him. The dream world exists in a pure subjective space. It does not interact with objective space. It's also crucial to understand that in dreams, the dreamer can construct... Oh, that's cool. Someone got a mask. Awesome. Hey, that's very cool. That's very cool. Just so you know, guys, we do have merch, and if you get a mask or a t-shirt or something, it does pop up in the stream, and you can include a message. Anyway, sorry, distracted. That was just kind of cool. Anyway, I digress. So when someone is dreaming, the dream doesn't pop out of someone's head. It's occurring internally in a subjective space. It's crucial to understand that in dreams, the dreamer can construct many different people and give them things to say and do. The mind is astonishingly versatile and creative. It can simulate anything that it chooses to. In its own dreams, the mind has all the powers of God. It is the creator. It is the master and author of all it surveys. And it's your higher self that is the architect of your dreams. It doesn't make dreams out of nothing at all, as the Abrahamic God allegedly does. It makes it out of itself, its own mental content, its own basis waves, sinusoids, which ontologically are basis thoughts. We talk about ontological mathematics being a system of information carrier, syntax, and information carried, semantics. In other words, the quantitative rationalist aspect of information that we can understand, and its flip side, the qualitative empirical aspect of information that we directly experience. What is a thought? It's not some free-floating abstraction. It's an entity with an ontology, meaning it actually exists. A thought has both a syntax, its quantitative aspect, its mathematical structure, and a semantics, its qualitative aspect, the aspect that we can experience. As we are thinking, we directly experience our thoughts, their semantic phenomenal content. We definitely do not experience the syntax, the quantitative mode, the structure of the thought. This is the noumenal form of the thought. It's permanently hidden from the phenomenal experience, and this is exactly why empiricism is a catastrophic ideology. It ignores the structure, the syntax of reality. Empiricism claims that all knowledge comes from experience, but experience concerns only the phenomenal content of thinking, the semantic aspect of thought. We never, under any circumstance, experience what the thought actually is. Its ontology. We don't experience its epistemology, metaphysics, physics, form, syntax. The noumenal domain is always inherently concealed from our experience because it's the flip side of experience, and you can't access the experience and what the experience is made of any more than you can experience heads and tails at the same time when you toss a coin. Our minds, experientially, is 100% attuned to the semantic aspect of thoughts. Our minds regard the information carried as concrete, what we experience, and regard the information carried as abstract, what we don't experience. This is the whole problem with science. Science regards matter, phenomenal information carried, as concrete reality, and it regards mathematics, noumenal information carrier, as an unreal abstraction. Step one of the scientific method is to observe. And this automatically means that science is restricted to the information carried, the content, the qualitative aspect, the observable, empirical, concrete side of things. Yet because all experiences are in fact carried by quantitative syntactic information carriers, even though they are never experienced as information carriers, then the experiential world, despite itself, has measurable quantitative structure visible everywhere. That is, noumenal structure can't help but manifest itself in the world created from it, even though it isn't seen directly. So we can say that the underlying noumenal syntax of reality has a phenomenal aspect that is very much observable. This phenomenal aspect is not the noumenal syntax itself, but rather its observable experiential effect. It's this phenomenal structure that science studies and measures, and tries to work out what reality is on the basis of this alone. Science has no clue that observable phenomenal syntax, all the patterns we see in the world, are underpinned by rationalist innate mathematical syntax that we never phenomenally encounter in any way. Now, rationalism is the rival system that asserts that all knowledge comes from logical, rational deduction, and the innate analytic ideas built into reality form the only secure basis of knowledge. Rationalism is the subject that studies rational syntax, while empiricism is a subject that studies empirical semantics, but the latter could not exist without the former. Catastrophically, empiricism ideologically rejects rationalism exactly because it cannot be experienced, because it is the carrier of experience rather than that which it is experienced. Rationalism does not rely on any observations, feelings, experiences, or mystical intuitions. Rationalism relies on reason and logic, which is exactly why it is pure mathematics. Science uses mathematics, yet it is fundamentally against mathematics because it is fundamentally against rationalism and denies that there is an innate syntax to reality that is inaccessible to reason and logic but can never be observed under any circumstances. Once again, if this ever seems confusing, go back to the computer game metaphor. If you're in a computer game, you can never observe the code within the game. You can't. The code is never ever in the game, but the game relies on the code for its existence. So, scientific empiricism rejects the code because it can't observe it. But as rationalists, we know that we can know the code through reason because we can rationally deduce that obviously there must be a code for a game to exist. Exactly as we can rationally deduce that for there a dream to exist, there must be a dreamer. If you privilege observation over everything else, you can never be on the side of reason, logic, mathematics, and rationalism. That's a simple, rational, and logical fact. Science is not the friend of reason and logic. It's their enemy. It opposes everything they stand for. They are excluded from the scientific method. No reference is ever made to them at all in the scientific method. Observation is all. The empiricist paradigm begins with the injunction to experience. For sensing types, this means observation. For feeling types, it means emotional experience, how something makes them feel. For mystical intuitives, it means some great vision or epiphany accompanied by a highly unusual peak emotional state, making them feel they have broken through to some higher reality. This is the sort of state on LSD or something like this. The rationalist paradigm is totally different. It begins with the injunction to think. It proceeds entirely by way of reason, logic, deduction, mathematics, and a priori analysis. It's a totally different way of relating to reality, syntactically rather than semantically, and for exactly that reason, it is rejected by almost all of humanity. The average human regards semantic, empirical reality as real, concrete reality, and correspondingly regards syntactic, rational reality as unreal, abstract, and man-made. And this is why average humans hate mathematics so much and are so opposed to rationalism. Nothing could be more alien and strange to them. They live by their experiences and are totally oblivious to the fact that their experiences must be conveyed by something with a rational, logical syntax that they will never once experience. Mystical intuitives seek to transcend reality, but what they really want is the experience of some higher state of being, to be absorbed into a great comforting oneness. It never once occurs to them that transcendence, real transcendence, actually means transcending experience itself and switching to the other side of reality. See, even these mystical intuitives and those who do LSD and whatnot, remember, and I have nothing against psychedelics, but they're merely a tool. So those who think that that's the answer to reality are sorely mistaken, because they are still trapped within experience. And the whole point is to transcend experience itself. So it never once occurs to them that transcendence, real transcendence, actually means transcending experience itself and switching to the other side of reality, the source reality, the other side of the coin, namely the quantitative, syntactic, rational, logical, mathematical aspect of reality, that part of reality, the true essence of reality, the living mathematical nature of reality, which is where all true knowledge and understanding reside. Empiricists want to experience their way to ultimate reality. Emotionalists want to enter into a total, absolute, unconditional love with reality in itself. And that's their great dream, and it usually revolves around the ultimate lover, God or some God substitute. Mystic intuitives believe that if they meditate hard enough, if they become mindful enough, that they can reorient their thinking enough to enter into communion and union with the great oneness, which is another version of God, basically. Sensing types would love to be able to observe all of reality all at once, because only observation seems real to them. You cannot experience your way to ultimate knowledge. Knowledge is about reason and logic, not experience. Knowledge is about universals, not particulars. And universals must be attained through thought, through rational knowledge. Now, empiricists base everything on experience, yet don't know the first thing about the real nature of experience. What is an experience? What is an experience? What is it made of? What's its ontology? What epistemology does it reflect? What physics and metaphysics applies to it? How does the experience of love fit into scientific reality? How does it relate to matter, to lifeless, mindless atoms? What is an intuitive's mystical vision a vision of? What is the source of the vision? What is the source of your LSD trip? What is the source of reality? Why is existence possible at all? Well, experience can't explain that. It can't explain anything. The experience of being alive doesn't tell you what life is. The experience of having a mind doesn't tell you what mind is. The experience of being in love or in hate doesn't tell you what love or hate is. The experience of observing the universe doesn't tell you what the universe is. Experience is more or less useless in knowledge terms. It's mostly anti-knowledge. Knowledge is not its game. The game of experience is what it says on the tin. Experience. Experience is the desired end, not knowledge. So once again, if you were in a video game, experiencing the game doesn't lead you to the code. You can experience the game all you want, but it doesn't lead you to the code. You need to be able to transcend experience to access the code. No one experiences knowledge. Knowledge is something that you acquire conceptually. Animals have experience. They don't have knowledge. They don't have concepts. They may be able to carry out simple problem solving at a very basic level, but they don't have the vaguest idea of what reality is. They don't need to know. Equally, 99% of humans have no clue what reality is, and it has never held them back. They have enjoyed experiences galore, however. Endless experience has no correspondence to endless knowledge. You can have 1 trillion experiences and know literally zero about what reality is. If you add up all the experiences of all humans, it adds up to a vast repository. But how many humans know shit? If you make no attempt to acquire knowledge, you never will acquire it. As humanity has so relentlessly proved, if all you care about is experience, experience will be exactly what you get, not knowledge. Humanity has had every type of experience imaginable. Every individual has had experience galore. How many humans have knowledge of reality? Practically zero. That's because the experience of reality is totally different from knowledge of reality. Knowledge is about syntax. Experience is about semantics. All the experiences possible would reveal not a single thing about the true nature of reality. You could observe the world forever and know nothing about it. You could be in love forever and know nothing about reality, or even understand what love is, for that matter. You could meditate forever and know nothing about reality. Meditation is no path to enlightenment. Knowledge is. How can you make the most use of experience unless you know what experience is in itself? Only once you know experience, which is to say you know it as syntax, can you maximize your experiences as semantics. You cannot reach semantic enlightenment until you have first attained cognitive knowledge-based syntactic enlightenment based on reason, logic, and mathematics. But that's the last thing that empiricists want to hear. They despise the very idea of it, which is why they will never be enlightened. The basic model of monadic life is that of a mind dreaming and being baffled by and alienated from the dream. It doesn't understand the dream. It doesn't know what's happening to it. It's having many vivid experiences, some delicious and some nightmarish. It can't make any sense of the succession of weird experiences. It cannot discern any meaning or purpose. Now, do you see what's going on? Experience in and of itself explains nothing. It tells you nothing. You are clueless about what experience is and what the point of experience is. You are certainly having experiences, but you have no control over them, and you don't know what this strange experiential world is all about. Why is this happening to you? The basic monadic experience isn't a reassuring one. The whole experience is disconcerting, disorienting, and frequently disturbing. However, let's imagine that the monad can jump to a higher level. It can switch from a passive mode of having experiences done to it to an active mode where it has much more control over what it experiences. This active mode is known as a lucid dream. Lucid dreaming allows the dreamer to shape the experiences he has and generally make them much more pleasant. But the lucid dreamer still has no idea what he is, what dreams are, why he's in the situation, and what it's all about. He's not enlightened in any way, although he feels far better off than the passive dreamer. Having considered just one monad, now let's imagine a vast collection of monads. Let's imagine that all of these monads starting out in a passive dreaming mode, experiencing only their own mental content. Then imagine that after a while, they progress to lucid dreaming mode. Well, so far so good, but where do things go after that? What's next? How does the system explain itself? Why does the system exist at all? And where, if anywhere, is it heading? Thus far, we have been discussing monadic minds as private entities, as windowless, with no way to see or interact with other monads. Each monad is locked in its own world. Even if it evolves to lucidity, it still has nowhere near an understanding of what reality is. Lucidity does not lead to understanding, just to more control over experience, and therefore to better experiences. For empiricists, this is in fact all they really care about. A meditator has zero interest in knowing what reality is. A meditator sees his objective as entering into union with ultimate reality, the oneness, which he believes will lead to the best possible experience, bliss, nirvana, paradise, moksha, heaven, or whatever. And this is his precise aim, to optimize experience. It's certainly not to optimize knowledge. The maximization of experience is what empiricists call enlightenment. Of course, it's nothing of the kind. If a person becomes infinitely happy, are they enlightened? Or just maximally happy? The only possible real meaning of enlightenment is that it leads to total knowledge of existence, of why everything exists, of why the universe operates as it does, of what your role in the whole enterprise is. Becoming infinitely happy doesn't enlighten you in any way, although empirical emotionalists may desire nothing else. Philosopher Robert Nozick spoke about people being hooked up to an experience machine. If people could come along and attach themselves to the experience machine and instantly become infinitely happy and remain in that state forever, would you consider such people enlightened? In what way would they be enlightened? All they did was plug themselves into a machine, like the Matrix, and it delivered an experience they desired. Is that what qualifies as enlightenment these days? The person attached to the happiness machine could tell you nothing about what existence is, why you exist, why he exists, why the world exists, what the purpose is, what the meaning is, what the point is, what happiness is. He could tell you only that if you plugged into this machine, you too would be infinitely happy. Well, does that constitute revealing the secret of enlightenment? If so, you have an incredibly degraded notion of what enlightenment is. You have reduced it to nothing but an experiential state supplied by a machine. Or let's say that the experience machine delivers infinite love and light to satisfy the emotionalists. If you could plug the love and lighters into a machine that delivers infinite love and light, haven't you thereby brought their search for the truth to an end? They wanted infinite love and light, and now they've got it, thanks to a machine. Is that all that these people want? To be given a specific experience, but magnified to maximum extent? Is that the point of their existence? Is that what it's all about? Now, a non-emotionalist couldn't imagine anything worse. You might as well have a lobotomy. Or let's say that the experience machine gave you the capacity to observe every part of the universe. You could zoom in and look at anything you liked to an infinite degree. And that would keep all scientists happy. But what would they learn about existence from an infinite number of observations of existence? Anything at all? No, nothing. Wikipedia says, the experience machine or pleasure machine is a thought experiment put forward by philosopher Robert Nozick. It is one of the best known attempts to refute ethical hedonism, and does so by imagining a choice between everyday reality and an apparently preferable simulated reality. If the primary thesis of hedonism is that pleasure is the good, then any component of life that is not pleasurable does nothing directly to increase one's well-being. Nozick attacks the thesis by means of a thought experiment. If he can show that there is something other than pleasure that has value and thereby increases our well-being, then hedonism is defeated. For 99% of humanity, hedonism is all they care about. They are all last men and ignavi, constantly searching for trivial happiness and pleasure. For most people, pleasure is the meaning of life. They never, not knowledge, right? They never take on any great challenges, any awesome tasks. Wikipedia says, Nozick asks us to imagine a machine that could give us whatever desirable or pleasurable experiences we could want. Psychologists have figured out a way to stimulate a person's brain to induce pleasurable experiences that the subject could not distinguish from those he would have apart from the machine. He then asks if, given the choice, would we prefer the machine to real life? If pleasure were the only intrinsic value, people would have an overriding reason to be hooked up to the experience machine, which would produce favorable sensations. Well, don't people behave exactly like this? Look at how many people take drugs, alcohol, opioids, prescription drugs, and so on and so on. Look at how many people vegetate in front of TVs, game boxes, box sets, YouTube videos, social media, and so on. Aren't these all experience machines? Aren't prayer, meditation, and mindfulness experience machines? The whole empiricist shtick revolves around experience machines. The ultimate experience machine, of course, being the human body itself. Nozick believed that happiness requires pleasurable experiences that are in contact with reality. So his claim was that if offered the chance to plug into a machine that delivered exclusively pleasurable experiences, people would reject this offer. Well, what planet do people like Nozick live on? What is religion if not an experience machine people plug into to shield them from reality and give them a fantasy of infinite pleasure to come? What is meditation all about if not the promise of infinite pleasure to be attained? What is mindfulness about? What about prayer, ritual, spirituality, mythos? They're all in the same game, offering a fantasy world to allow people to escape in their mind from a shithole that they're actually in. Religion, spirituality, story, entertainment, distraction, social media, all of these count as effective Nozick experience machines, and they totally refute Nozick's hypothesis. Most people are addicts craving experiential highs. Knowledge highs are of zero interest to them. No heroin addict wants to immerse himself in a math book. Wikipedia says, addiction is a chronic brain disorder consisting of compulsive drug taking and seeking that is maintained despite detrimental effects on various aspects of life, including health, relationships, and work. Laboratory procedures can establish compulsive self-administration habits of seeking and ingesting that quality as addictive behaviors. Rodents and non-human primates have been shown to work in a compulsive manner, to receive intravenous injections of stimulants, and when access to the drug is not limited, they will self-administer the drug to the point of severe weight loss and death. So isn't that a description of creatures doing anything to hook up to an experience machine? A few meditators, a mere handful, might imagine that becoming one with ultimate reality will lead to gaining all knowledge of what reality is, but they put no effort into imagining what that might be like. What would constitute all knowledge, a total explanation of everything, an account of why existence exists at all, and if it has any purpose, meaning, and point? No meditator ever meditates on such things. The Buddha claimed to be enlightened, but didn't offer any explanation of what reality actually is, hence wasn't enlightened at all. All he cared about was suffering and bringing an end to suffering. In other words, he was just an emotionalist with a mystical propensity. A few scientists imagined that there is an equation to explain all of reality. How would constant observation reveal what this equation is? The equation itself isn't inobservable. As for love and lighters, well, they have zero interest in knowledge. They simply want to experience unconditional love. They have no interest in anything else. They don't want an explanation of love, an account of why it exists. They just want the feeling itself. Knowledge is despised by most people. What they want is experience, beautiful experience that fully satisfies whatever experiential craving they have, whether it be emotional, intuitive, or sensory. Reason and logic don't appeal to them at all. Thinking isn't their thing. It never is for empiricists. A rationalist seeks a rational and logical explanation for experience. A rationalist isn't looking for a feeling, a perception, or a mystical vision. Whatever the Buddha thought enlightenment is, it definitely is not what a rationalist regards it as enlightenment. Whatever a meditator thinks enlightenment is definitely not enlightenment to a rationalist. Isn't that amazing? Even the word enlightenment is utterly contentious. It's a different thing for different people. Enlightenment, unless it is absolute, is not enlightenment at all. Only rationalists understand this. That's why there are so many falsely enlightened people in the world. So many false awakeners spreading utter nonsense about enlightenment. These people are all relativists and subjectivists. Enlightenment for these people becomes whatever they personally want it to be. It's always made in their own image. This means that anyone anywhere can convince themselves that they are special, that they are enlightened. That, of course, is exactly why meditation is so popular. Anyone with no qualifications at all, no knowledge at all, no conceivable explanation of reality at all, can say they meditated and reached enlightenment. And no one can contradict them. After all, it's a subjective experience. And that's all that meditation can ever offer. It's as subjective as a private dream. People love subjectivity because anyone can claim to be an expert and they don't have to prove anything or explain anything. They just need to assert their own expertise, their own greatness, their own specialness, their own truth. Subjectivity is the con man's best friend. It's what the charlatan relies on. The fraud must never be placed in the position of factually explaining anything. Look at the Buddha. He claims to be enlightened for decades. Yet, what does his enlightenment consist of? He absurdly claimed that life is suffering, and then he gave his personal solution to what the cure for suffering is. Well, was it a great answer? Obviously not. The vast majority of people are not Buddhists. Whatever the Buddha was selling, most people weren't buying. What does a rationalist expect of an enlightened person? The rationalist wants the answer to everything, the infallible, the absolute answer. And what did the Buddha provide for a rationalist? Nothing at all. The Buddha said, I teach only suffering and the cessation of suffering. Actually, mate, you taught your subjective impressions of suffering and your subjective formula for ending your own suffering. It's not clear that you even succeeded for yourself, never mind for anyone else. And you made your wife and son miserable by walking out on them. You impose suffering on others in order to bring about the end of suffering. The end of your suffering, not theirs. It's totally bizarre that people such as the Buddha, or Moses, Jesus, or Mohammed, and so on are taken seriously. To a rationalist, these people didn't say a single thing worth knowing. Literally 100% of what they said can be dismissed. They never made any contribution to the cause of reason and logic. Any book on mathematics is more valuable than all the contributions of mainstream religion and spirituality put together. A humanity that studied books on mathematics rather than praying, meditating, playing video games, and watching box sets would be living in paradise by now. And that's the ironic thing, right? That humans hate reason so much, but if they embraced reason, they would be able to create a world of wondrous experiences. And that's the ironic thing, is that humans want experience but hate reason. But if they embraced reason, they would be able to create a world of beautiful experiences. A humanity that studied books on mathematics and reason and logic instead of praying and meditating would be living in paradise by now. But humanity is basically full of non-humans. They have a staggeringly low interaction with knowledge. That's because they are empiricists. Empiricists, by their nature, are not interested in knowledge. They are people of the body, not of the mind. Now, the Gnostics believed in three types of people: pneumatics, the people of spirit; psychics, the people of the soul; and hylics, the fleshly people of matter. In these terms, the vast majority of human beings are hylics, materialist empiricists. At best, some of these people have a touch of soul. But the people of mind, of knowledge, the pneumatics, are extremely rare. If you want to be enlightened, you must overcome your hylic nature, not indulge it. The way to transcend your physicality is to become a person of reason and logic. These are not embodied. Feelings, perceptions, and mystical intuitions, by contrast, are all embodied. These are exactly what you need to escape from. These define the human condition. Reason and logic define reality. If you want to escape the material plane and get in touch with reality itself, you have to switch to reality's way of understanding itself, and it does so via reason and logic. Self-thinking thought, as Hegel would say in The Science of Logic. But people don't want to transcend the human condition. They want to indulge it to the maximum. That's why they will never be enlightened. Every time someone tells you that you must embody your knowledge, that's when you know that they're talking shit. You must do the exact opposite. You must become disembodied. The task is to become angelic, a person of mind. Each monadic mind is a singularity, and thus the collection of all monads is a singularity too. If monads were windowless, they would be unable to interact with each other. Each would have to evolve entirely on its own. However, monads are in fact windowed. They can see each other and interact with each other. In fact, by the mathematical properties of sinusoids, monads are able to share sinusoids within a certain frequency band. All of these shareable sinusoids exist in a singularity, so have no difficulty in interacting with each other. In a manner of speaking, they are all in exactly the same place. This means that monads are not doomed to dreaming separately. They can all dream together. But when minds dream together, their collective dream becomes something qualitatively and quantitatively different from an individual dream. This is like in a video game. We're not all stuck on single player. We can all connect to the server and play multiplayer mode. That's what this collective dream world is. All individual dreams are subjective. Only the individual dreamer experiences it. Just like in a game, only the person playing single player experiences that single player game. No other dreamer or gamer can access it, right? It's very different with the collective dream, however, or the multiplayer game. When you connect to the server, all dreamers experience it. Every dreamer can access it. This is therefore an objective dream, and we don't call an objective dream a dream. We call it objective reality. Hyperianism, we call it the holos. In a subjective dream, the individual mind can change any detail of the entire dream world at whim. In the objective world, no individual can change any detail of the entire world at whim. In the objective world, you can change the world only where it intersects your physical body, your avatar. The only thing in the world that you directly control. Only via your avatar can you make changes. You can change any detail in your own dreams because there's no one to stop you. You can't change any detail in the objective world because you are up against the resistance of every monadic mind in existence. In the objective world, no individual will rules, which means that the objective world reduces to its lowest common denominator state, that of pure default syntax. And this is exactly why the objective world seems mechanical, lifeless, purposeless, and scientific. It's simply obeying pure default mathematical law. No individual mind is directing it to do anything. It's a collective direction. Yet, like solving a Rubik's Cube, it is in fact relentlessly engaged in solving a universe-wide syntactic problem. How to reach the optimal syntactic state. That state is an exact one, zero entropy. At zero syntactic entropy, all semantic qualities are optimized. Reason is maximized, logic is maximized, perception is optimized, power is optimized, thought is optimized, intuition is optimized, and love is optimized. This is the God state. All the monads acting together create a collective wave function, the wave function of the physical universe. This, like all wave functions, is both syntactic and semantic. The syntactic aspect of the wave function is the mathematical wave function. The semantic aspect of the wave function is the world we actually observe. Yet this is by no means the whole story. Just as we have a visible body and an invisible mind, the objective world has an objective, invisible psyche. And this objective psyche is what Jung called the collective unconscious. And this is the domain of archetypes. The physical world is controlled by the syntactic laws of wave mathematics, which we might call mathematical archetypes. The more conventional archetypes are semantic archetypes, and these evolve in tandem with the life forms of the world. How do animals without consciousness, without language-based intellect, without access to concepts, reason, logic, analysis, and so on decide what to do? They use instincts. But what are instincts? Instincts are the process that carry out archetypal instructions, or they're a kind of mathematical function. Jung described the archetype as the self-portrait of the instinct. It's the instinct's perception of itself. It's the mental aspect of a biological instinct. When an animal behaves instinctively, it's not a case of its body automatically doing certain actions, as the scientific materialist would have you believe. Rather, instinctual behavior is actually stereotypical mental behavior translated into stereotypical physical actions. If you lack consciousness and the ability to intelligently and adaptively react to a situation, the only thing that will save you in a tight spot is carrying out archetypal, instinctual, mathematical functions, responses built in to your species. Like fight or flight as an example. Archetypes are how all mental entities carry out basic thinking without doing the sort of considered thinking that constitutes intelligent free will. Why are humans the masters of the world, while all other animals on Earth vary firmly in the narrow niches conferred on them by evolution? Because humans alone are generalist thinkers. All other animals are particular archetypal thinkers. Conceptual language allows humans to escape from archetypes when we can access universals. With conceptual language, humans can learn and can think up literally endless new ideas, and this capacity to keep introducing ideas renders stereotypical archetypal behavior redundant. Archetypes are for situations where nothing much changes across millennia. Humans rule this world because language is what allows us to invent new behaviors second by second. We aren't stuck with instincts. That said, the vast majority of human beings, especially those that believe in ancient religions, still behave in the same way as the humanity of long ago. They are locked into human traditions that serve in effect as human archetypes. They're these programs, right? These ancient religions are like programs that become installed. Conservatives are people who cannot keep up with change and always want to do things in the way that have always been done. Conservatives are much more archetypal than progressives. The most progressive people of all are the smartest humans, the geniuses. They are the least enthralled to primitive archetypes. The world wave function doesn't serve up the physical world, or doesn't just serve up the physical world, it also serves up all the archetypes required to give all plants and animals a basic psyche. The human psyche at birth is totally archetypal, and then is rapidly altered by education, by language acquisition, into a psyche that can manifest consciousness, which is to say highly adaptive decision making. The more educated you are, and the more literate you are, the more conscious you are, and the better able you are to understand yourself and avoid primitive archetypes, the bestial shadow, so to speak. In rather loose terms, we can say that there is an immanent collective wave function, the space-time universe of matter coupled with the collective unconscious, that is everywhere penetrated by transcendent monadic minds. These minds, the more conscious they become, can inject more and more free will into the world and pull it further and further away from archetypal behavior. When Abraham agreed to murder his son because a voice in his head commanded it, That was archetypal behavior, not a conscious man responding to an outrageous and evil suggestion. Strictly speaking, the universal wave function is holographic, meaning that the whole, the transcendent cosmic mind made of transcendent individual monads, is in every part the immanent cosmic body of space, time, and matter. There is nothing baffling about souls and how they interact with bodies. Souls are individual transcendent wave functions that link to individual bodies, avatars in the immanent space-time wave function of the monadic collective. Although the immanent space-time wave function is just a single collective wave function, it can be functionally treated as a vast collection of sub-wave functions corresponding to individual objects or bodies in space-time, albeit they are all entangled. The key step in a soul linking to a body takes place, of course, at conception. Biologically, it would seem that a new life is formed when a sperm and egg fuse. Wikipedia says that fertilization occurs when the nucleus of both a sperm and an egg fuse to form a diploid cell known as a zygote. The successful fusion forms a new organism. Now, mathematically, this is not what produces a new organism. It's a necessary, but it's not a sufficient condition. It is an immanent process, but lacks the key transcendent element. When the egg and sperm fuse to generate a cell that contains the code, the DNA, for a new life form, this is an immanent process, but life itself is still not present. Life is transcendent, not immanent. And the new cell is a wave function in the immanent universe related to the body, the avatar, the vessel, the container. For life to actually be given to the cell, for the cell to be animated, the wave function of a transcendent monad has to dock with the wave function of the cell. This creates the defining transcendent immanence coupling that constitutes the mind-body relationship central to our existence. Science gets nothing out of this because it rejects mind, it rejects soul, it rejects transcendence, it rejects the ontology of mathematics. The soul is not magical and mystical. It's not an object of faith. It's simply an individual mathematical wave function that links to a sub-wave function, body, in the collective immanent wave function. It's literally all in the math. A transcendent mathematical wave function docks with an immanent mathematical wave function. And what's so hard to understand about that? Why is that regarded as in any way mysterious and unscientific? Once a transcendent soul, an immaterial frequency singularity, has learned to dock with an immaterial body, a material space-time avatar, it has all the information it requires to engage in reincarnation. Each time its current body dies, the link between the transcendent soul and immanent body breaks down due to wear and tear, aging, disease, accident, cell mutation, and so on. The soul has the wherewithal to dock with a new body and enjoy a new life. The better the soul becomes at the docking procedure, the more knowledge it gains of reincarnation, the better able it is to exercise control over the reincarnational process and choose exactly the body it wants. Most people have no clue about reincarnation, and their monadic soul links to a new body in a haphazard way, and they exercise no control. One day, someone will be awarded a Nobel Prize for explaining the precise details of the docking procedure between a transcendent individual soul wave function and an immanent collective body wave function, and this will stand as a decisive moment in human history. It will be the moment when humanity becomes fully religious and spiritual, but now in an entirely rational and logical way. All faith, mysticism, emotionalism, mythos, tradition, and superstition will be abolished at last. Thank God. A soul docking with a body is not an observable process. It's mathematical, not scientific, rational, not empirical. The soul can be understood only mathematically. Just do the math. You know it. Conclusion. Here we are at the end. Friedrich Nietzsche says, "Here the ways of men divide. If you wish to strive for peace of soul and happiness, then believe. If you wish to be a disciple of truth, then inquire." Oh, I'm sorry, I read that incorrectly. Here the ways of men divide. If you wish to strive for peace of soul and happiness, then believe. If you wish to be a disciple of truth, then inquire. The idiotic ideology of scientism, extremist materialism and empiricism, has prevented humanity from seriously exploring the most important thing of all, your own soul. Thanks to scientism, humans have become alienated from themselves. They have turned away from themselves. Materialists consider themselves robots, devoid of free will. They believe that the universe is meaningless, purposeless, and pointless. Now, these people are nihilists. They are disastrous for human beings discovering the truth of their own existence. Science is a heuristic modeling system with use value, but it is no kind of tool for studying existence itself. It has nothing to do with the truth. Science is predicated on matter, something that doesn't actually exist in the terms required by science. The notion that dead matter produces life is absurd. The idea that unthinking matter produces mind is ludicrous. The belief that non-sentient lumps of matter can produce sentience, the unconscious, and consciousness is laughable. The claim that objects can create subjects and qualia is ridiculous. The belief that unfree things can generate the illusion of free will is comically silly. The assertion that matter, a temporal and contingent construct, can explain eternal and necessary existence is insane. Now, why are all these bizarre, irrational, and illogical claims of scientism given a free pass? Why is there no general discussion of the essentially mad claims made by so many? The eternal mind, the soul, is the basis of existence. It's the fundamental unit of existence. Souls are the building blocks of reality. Everything in the universe is caused by, generated by, and created by souls. Souls use their sinusoidal content to make the universe. Everything derives from souls and their sinusoidal basis waves. It's time to get on board with the reality of souls. Over the old temples of the mysteries was inscribed the message, "Man, know thyself, and thou shalt know the universe and God." Isn't it time you know yourself? Isn't it time you understood what your soul is made of, how it functions, what operations it performs, and what it's seeking to achieve? That is the meaning of your life. Otherwise, what's the point? The collection of all souls is God, the amazing cosmic hive mind, the true creator of the universe. In Hyperianism, what we refer to as the absolute. What could be more mind-blowing than that? Nietzsche said, "I go in solitude so as not to drink out of everybody's cistern. When I am among the many, I live as the many do, and I do not think I really think. After a time, it always seems as if they want to banish myself from myself and rob me of my soul." Don't let anyone steal your soul, and don't sell it to the highest bidder. It's all yours. It is you. Do right by it. So, thus concludes Soul Science by Steve Madison. And the biggest takeaway from this is to realize that the soul, the eternal mind, the monad, is a rationalist mathematical entity that we can truly know. There are many important things to consider in this. The difference between form and content, the difference between experience and knowledge, and the truth that we can know ourselves as eternal mathematical minds, and it has nothing to do with faith, or mysticism, or belief, but rather logic, reason, and knowledge. So, once again, if you enjoyed this work, consider supporting the author. The link will be in the description of this video. And these are incredibly important concepts to know and realize as we reach the next step of our evolution. Now, as I said, this is the final part of this book. But next week, we will be starting a new book on Monday. So make sure that you are there and join us as we begin something new.